Okay, one thing to note when you're putting your new trigger in that's real important. Now, I put the stock trigger back in for just a moment. When you remove that magazine catch, the trigger should drop right out the back. When you insert the trigger, if you point the gun in a downward position without the magazine catch in, you should see when I pull the trigger back, it drops freely. Now, one thing you may run into, that I am running into, is when you take the new trigger and put that new trigger in there. If you'll notice, I pull the trigger up, it's not freely dropping back into place. It's a little tight and is going to require a little bit of adjustment. These are not true drop-in triggers. So what you're going to want to do, for starters, take your trigger, take your magazine. Make sure that magazine slides freely through the trigger. In this case, it does. So we know that the trigger is not bent inwards. It's bent outwards slightly, and it's catching up on the inside frame of the 1911. So it's going to require a little fitting. This is something you're going to have to do on your part, but I'm going to work this down a little bit, and going to use probably a ball peen hammer or possibly a plastic mallet of some type and a wood block in there, and I'm just going to work this down just a little bit to make it so when I do drop it in that frame, it's nice and loose. Okay, and you can see it's loosened up a little just by me applying pressure with my hands. So it's not going to require a lot of fitting, but a little bit of fitting will be necessary. So make sure you get that trigger nice and loose like it's supposed to be before you go ahead and reassemble the gun. Alright, we're back. I've worked the trigger a little bit, and as you see, when I angle the gun down, trigger is nice and smooth and loose, just like we want it. And if you check this against the magazine, you'll still see we have free movement, so that the magazine will drop like it's supposed to. So go ahead, assemble the trigger, drop that in. On the right side, go ahead, place your magazine catch back in all the way down, and what I do is I take the screwdriver, I hold that screw down as I push the magazine up and clockwise turn. Magazine catch is working, and you can see the trigger still exactly like I want it. So next we're going to go ahead and start on the reassembly of the gun, and we'll be back. Alright, next we're going to start putting this thing back together. Now this part's not real difficult, but it does require a couple of these small pieces. I know these are hard to see. I'm going to try and shine a little light on them. But you've got this piece here. These are all part of the sear. You've got that piece, and of course your pin. Now the best way to describe putting this thing back together, when you take a look at this, kind of look at that upside there, that is the top. This is going to slide up into the frame and through this hole in the top of the frame here. The assembled piece, you've got the top end. This sits over it, kind of fits together, you can see like that. And if you look on the side, there's the holes that the pin is going to run through. So from the side it looks like that, slips into the back of the frame, up in through the hole. So you're going to have to just kind of maneuver it, either with your fingers or using needle nose pliers, kind of working it up into place, and just kind of get it in there the best you can. This is real difficult to see on the camera, so I'm gonna try and shine a light in there. This is what the finished product should look like. I know it's probably hard to see, but if you look up on the top, you can see the pin is coming up there through the top. Then you'll take the pin here, reassemble from the left side of the receiver, line those holes up and into the right. And I'll be back once that's finished. Okay, now we're going to work with the hammer. Now you've got this hammer strut that's going to have to come off the old hammer, which is held in place with this hammer strut pin. Now some of these are staked into place and are a little bit more difficult to remove this pin than other models. A press or a punch, which is what I'm going to use, should suffice in removing that pin. Now normally I'd say set this thing on a vise and tap it out. Don't have a vise handy, so I'm going to use my poor man's vise here, this pipe wrench. I'm just going to kind of lay it on there so it gives room for that pin to fall through the bottom, and just tap. Now, some might require a little bit more force than others, but get that pin out, and once it's out I'll show you what the finished product looks like. Okay, I got that pin removed. I have installed that on the new combat hammer. Now this pin, if you want, once it's in the gun it's not going to go anywhere. You can stake it into place or you can Loctite it if you want. Mine is somewhat snug, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it just like it is. Now one thing I didn't mention before, I would recommend using something like Break Free or something similar when you put this back together, these internal parts in here and that. Break Free, of course, cleans it and lubricates it all at once. A little bit easier to lubricate it now that it's apart. Otherwise you have to drop oil and kind of let it run down in there. But moving on, what we're going to do now is this sear spring. We're putting this back together. So that just goes in like that. There's a groove that it fits in there. Take your beaver tail or your hand grip safety, whatever you have. This is just going to sit in there for now. We're not going to pin it just yet. And then of course that slides in from the bottom to kind of hold everything in place. Once you get to that, we're going to go ahead and put the hammer in. So let me make some adjustments to the gun and we'll go from there. Okay, and here's the frame. You can see I've got the new combat hammer in, got my new Wilson's trigger in. Reassembly is just the opposite of disassembly. You can see it cocks and it fires. So I'm going to go ahead and reassemble it. There's the old hammer versus the new one. Hopefully this will prevent hammer bite. I'm going to reassemble it and we'll show you the final product. Alright, back with the final product. Gun's all put back together. As you can see, I've got my new trigger. Looks much more sharp. The new combat hammer. Everything appears to work on the gun. It cocks just fine. As you can see, when that hammer is extended all the way back, no more hammer bite. My last hammer was extending over the little tail there and biting my hand every now and then. And the gun appears to fire just fine. Trigger feels good. Trigger reset's working. Last thing to do is take it to the range and try it out. I'll have a review on the gun at the firing range with the new trigger and with the combat hammer. Also be sure to check out in that review I'll have be testing my new Chip McCormick 10-round magazines.